Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of NACDA's virtual programming lineup. Today, we are looking forward to hosting an interactive discussion on finding revenue opportunities while enhancing fan and donor experiences. We have with us representatives from Dimensional Innovations and Notre Dame Athletics. Dimensional Innovations is led by Executive Director Drew Berst, and they have really been a great partner of ours, especially over the last year during the pandemic, as they've been able to facilitate a lot of really cool collaborations with our member institutions. This webinar today is part of a new initiative spearheaded by Drew that will spark some valuable idea sharing and best practices, as many of you will be welcoming back fans to full or near full capacity this fall. Before I let Drew introduce our panelists and explain a little bit more about today's presentation, I just want to share a few housekeeping items with you. Like I mentioned, you are encouraged to keep your cameras on today, but please mute your microphones until our speakers open it up for Q&A. For the best viewing experience, we suggest that you switch your settings to active speaker mode so that your screen will highlight the presenters as they're speaking. And then when we do open it up for Q&A near the end, to ask a question, you can utilize the raise hand button that can be found in the reactions tab within your Zoom toolbar, should be at the bottom of your screen. One of our speakers will call on you, and then at that time you can unmute yourself and ask your question. And then throughout the presentation today, the chat box will also be open for attendees to communicate with the panelists as well. And with that, Drew, I'm going to hand it over to you. The show is yours.
Thank you very much, Dana. And yes, we very much appreciate NACDA for letting us try out our crazy ideas and then airing them live to an audience. So let's give this one a try. So introductions, I'll just go around my screen. Kim, you're first on my screen.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew. Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Borza Donaldson. I oversee our athletics advancement team at Notre Dame. I've been at ND for about 3 years and very excited to be here with all of you today.
And then Rob, you're next.
It's Rob Kelly. I oversee all things media and brand for Notre Dame Athletics. That basically entails leading a team by the name of Fighting Irish Media.
Fantastic. And Mario?
Hi, Mario Morris, Deputy Athletic Director, overseeing business operations and anything financial. I've been here at Notre Dame for 2 years. Prior to this, I was at Wisconsin for about 9 years.
Awesome. Technically, next on my screen is the great Don DeJulia, but I know he's not part of this panel, so I'll go with the DI team. Rick, you are next on my screen.
Hey everybody, Rick Smith. I'm the Executive Creative Director at Dimensional Innovations. I've been here for about 11 years. I run our design and creative team that is about 80 people strong currently, anywhere from graphic designers to technologists to experiential designers, architects, etc. We do anything from collegiate level to pro sports to corporate to museum spaces, and happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
And finally, Ryan Nicholson.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ryan Nicholson from Dimensional Innovations. I've been with DI for about 1.5 years, and I'm an interactive producer that helps basically bring things to life, usually with sort of a technological point to it. Nice to meet everybody.
And a former student athlete, a legendary basketball player for Oklahoma.
Legendary is stretching it. Oklahoma City University. So.
Love it. Okay. Sorry. Okay, let's get into this. Here, let me share my screen and go to full screen. Maybe. All right. So let me give a quick overview of us, just so everyone kind of has an understanding of why we're doing this. In other words, this is the part where I tell you how cool we are, but rather than just tell you how cool we are, let me try to prove it to you. We are experiential designers, right? So we create amazing experiences. And when we say that, we design, fabricate, build, and install experiences all with our own people. 300 people in our company, been doing it for a long time, and we have a whole lot of space in what would basically be a dream factory in Kansas City. There's our locations, but our main resources are here in Kansas City. So let me show you what I mean when I say we design, we fabricate, we're in technology. When we say we design, it means that we take a conceptual idea like this and turn it into an actual solution. When we say that we are fabricators, it means we take something like this and we turn it into this. When we say we're into technology, experiential technology. It means we take the Stanley Cup and turn it into a digital version of the Stanley Cup. When we say we innovate, it means we take a crazy idea like 180-degree theater, immersive theater, and we turn it into a gigantic 180-degree immersive theater for the Naval Academy. And when we say we 3D print, it means we take the idea of 3D printing a gigantic sculpture that is a tribute to an owner of an NFL team, and we actually print it and install it in an end zone. So we really are all about the experience. And that's why we really wanted to create this partnership with NACDA, with the idea of people coming to us with their crazy ideas, because we know it's a time when money's tight, right? So we felt like, some of these ideas are easy to execute and ideally, right, create revenue for, for our clients. So let's just put it out there and see what happens. So some of you probably saw this email. And this is where we had folks submit, one of which was Notre Dame. We got quite a few responses, and candidly, we picked this one. We'll talk more about it, but because it was actually kind of the simplest, it was an existing idea. So Mario or Kim, I'll have you speak to this, but kind of what got your attention, or really what brought about you all submitting?
Yeah, so thank you, Drew and NACDA. Thank you everybody being here. Well, I saw the email and I immediately emailed Kim and Rob and others that we needed to be a part of this. I thought it was an incredible opportunity. I'm a big believer in sharing ideas amongst our institutions. I think that makes us all better. As far as, sort of how we got started in this, it really, just very briefly, it started back sort of pre-pandemic. As everybody knows, our college athletics financial model has been under strain, and it was under strain before the pandemic. Most of us rely on revenue from 1 or 2 sports, if you're lucky 3, and then fundraising, and then potentially university investments or subsidies. And so we saw that play out, all of us, as the pandemic, as we experienced the pandemic. And we understood we needed to diversify revenue streams and create more non-game day related revenue streams. And we knew that there would be a day after the pandemic. And so our athletic director, Jack Swarbrick, tasked us with thinking about sort of what do we look like coming out of the pandemic and how can we get better while we were operating in the pandemic. And with that, we formed, in my group, we formed 5 committees. One was financial strategy, one was workforce planning, one was operational efficiency, one was revenue generation, new revenue generation ideas, and the other was revenue enhancement. How do we enhance some of our revenues right now? And so the idea that you're seeing now is sort of a mixture. It was an activity that we're performing, but our group came up with some ideas to enhance it. And so Kim Borza Donaldson, along with Deputy Athletic Director Jim Frawley, chaired our revenue enhancement committees, and they came up with several ideas, and this is the idea that we submitted. And I'll let Kim, talk more about sort of how she came to select this one.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Mario. So we were a part of the Revenue Enhancement Committee, and I see Jim is on the call, my partner in crime there. So one of the things we really focused on was aligning the goals of Fighting Irish Media, Rob's team, and then the athletics advancement team as well. So making sure our mission and our goals were aligned. So we looked into this, and something that kept coming up is that there are all of these really awesome things that FIM does, Fighting Irish Media, that people don't really ever get to see. So, broadcasts, how we collaborate with NBC to put on our broadcasts, going inside production trucks, that type of thing. They all have that behind the scenes feel that's so cool, but we're so close to it that sometimes I think we can take that coolness, for lack of a better word, for granted. So one of FIM's favorite days of the year, of course, is Media Day. And I know at all our institutions, we have some form of this Media Day for our student athletes. And they set up elaborate sets, and if you go in there, they're playing loud music, and they are just capturing student athletes in their most hyped up element. And we've seen so many media days collectively throughout our years in the industry, and we still look forward to it annually. So it got us thinking, imagine how cool this would be for somebody who's experiencing it for the very first time. And that's what really got us thinking about this Media Day. And maybe this could be a unique event for donors and not just for student athletes. And it really fits with the ideal model for our stewardship and our events for our top benefactors. And in this model, we always try to think of three things. Obviously, our benefactors, they have a lot of resources. So number one is we want to give them something that money can't buy. Number two is we want to create these, oh my gosh, how did you get to do this moments? So we want to make sure we're creating moments that are shareable on social media, that are shareable by word of mouth, that their friends can say, how did you ever get to do media day with Notre Dame? And they can say, well, you know, I'm a donor, I'm a part of this giving society with Notre Dame athletics, and that's how I get to be a part of this. We want to create those moments. And then finally, we always want our benefactors to feel like they are a part of the Notre Dame athletics family and like they're a part of the team. So that connection with student athletes, with our facilities, with our coaches, with our leaderships is paramount to what we do. And that's really how we got to this idea. So let's get our top benefactors going through a media day of their own right after our student athletes do.
Yeah, Kim, that's what really spoke to us, right? In choosing this was, it was the reason this really stood out was it was using something that existed, right? So it wasn't, hey, you need to come up with $1 million to put this in. It was, this exists. And if timed right, it costs basically very little, right? If it's on the back end of what exists or of the existing media day. So before I forget, you guys, we will be doing this 3 more times after this. So everyone look out. This was our schedule. You can look out for another open window of ideas, summer, right? Fall, winter. So just FYI. Okay, so let's talk about the current media day, right? So the one that exists for student athletes that we will then look at adapting, right, for a donor event. So Rob, do you mind giving us kind of a rundown on the current media day setup, how it all plays?
Yeah, sure thing. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible so you can get to the good stuff here. But and I'm going to start a little bit with a note on nomenclature. The term media day is probably best used for this type of an event that we're imagining here. Internally, and because I'll probably use this terminology on the call, we call it production day because every day in FIM is media day. But these events are production days where we're actually producing the content that we're going to use throughout the year to highlight and accentuate our amazing student athletes. So these production days usually happen in late summer, and it's after the student athletes have arrived to prepare for the fall semester and fall seasons, if that happens to be their championship season. But really the process begins all the way back in spring, shortly after the football season wraps up for the football team, or in like late winter, early spring. So, and that culminates with this idea of the development of a theme. And so the thinking is that if you have a theme, you can tie elements of a theme throughout all of your content so that you have a cohesive look and feel. And for us, sort of the pinnacle moment or event that takes place in the development of a theme is something that we call pitch day. And pitch day is a day in which anybody can bring to this meeting, a several-hour-long meeting, usually a half day, to pitch their concept for a theme for the year. And so it can usually encompasses a motto, a description of the look and feel, maybe some specific graphic elements or visual elements that the theme will capture or embody, and then those pitches are all sort of collectively voted on. We have a small team internally we call Innovation and Design within Fighting Irish Media that really leads that process for us of sort of developing the theme, running pitch day, and then bringing the sort of the pitch that we identify as the one that we want to go with to create our theme, to then build out what the visual artwork and visual design for production day is going to look like. And so as you might imagine, it involves props, it involves pyrotechnics at times, could involve extensive sort of digital displays to help with background and other thematic elements. We try to use our beautiful campus and our amazing architecture as much as possible, as well as just some of the really amazing interior architecture that we have, specifically things like our locker room, or the insides of some of our team spaces. But what you're going to see here in this video is a little bit of a behind the scenes from a past production day.
All right, so let's see. So by the way, again, we were laughing about this earlier. Every time I see that video, I just think of envision 60 something, 70 something, donors doing that video. And it brings me great joy. So Rob, I can flip through these if you want me to, but this speaks to what Rob was talking about earlier, right? This is a more recent deck. The theme, right? Correct, is rally was the theme. And then these were the sort of the stations, right? The different assets that you were looking to capture for this given media day. Am I describing that correctly?
Yeah, so diving into sort of the makeup of a production day, what you're basically doing is you're creating a handful of stations where you have a specific sort of design aspect or content that you're trying to capture. So you saw a photo burst example. In this case, we used something we call a tiny planet concept, where you can see the camera gets swung around the outside of the student athlete, and it looks like they're standing on they're a giant individual standing on a small planet. There's the selfie stick, which you put a small sort of pocket Osmo style camera on a selfie stick and let the players or the student athletes and coaches have fun with it themselves. That usually ends up with some really authentic and fun content. The goal here, sort of to bring it back to the ultimate sort of purpose of this from our perspective, is we're capturing content that we can use throughout the year, right? So on social channels, on our video boards in venue, in our productions for our broadcasts, as well as any other productions that we do from a feature presentation perspective. So if we do a documentary style or a hype tape, we're taking all of these assets and using them throughout the season to sort of provide that sort of common thread through everything that we create that makes it all look visually connected. And you can see here on this slide the example of what the sort of 4 stations would be like in this most recent production day that we did. Get a little bit of a sense of the number of people are involved. This is really the tip of the iceberg. We have these were the lead individuals for each of these particular stations. We have a sort of an army of temp on call contractors that support all the work that goes into this. And again, production day is all about the actual capture of the content. It doesn't then, you have to sort of think about then there's a lot of work that goes in afterwards into the actual editing and cutting of the footage after you've collected it, so that then you can distribute it and put it, catalog it, add the metadata, so you can find it easily when you're ready to use it.
By the way, can we talk about, is it Viva? Because emotional support feels like she needs a raise. Like that has got to be the most difficult job that exists on the spreadsheet.
So this is a little bit of an internal joke. So Viva is actually a small toy puppy that belongs to our social media manager for football.
That's awesome.
So Viva was there for emotional support. I'm surprised Archie isn't on here too. Archie's the golden Labrador that belongs to our head communications lead, our communications lead for football.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next couple slides here will show you the outputs. Really, is what these are. You'll see some of the assets that were created, for this most recent production day, I do believe. So here is one capture, right?
Yeah. So that's an example of the photo burst.
and then kind of how that ends up in the kind of the final reel. I'll play this.
This is football, right? It takes 4 quarters. This is never going to be easy. You got to fight. Trust each other to do their job. That's all you can rely on. You can only rely on the guy next to you doing his job.
There's some top-notch athletes on this Notre Dame defense. 2nd and 7, Clovis in trouble and brought down by Jeremiah Usa-Karamoa. The champ is here. Kelly falls out. Ali Ogundeji got a big arm in there. Chris direct to the end. Lindsay, Nicholson, Lindsay, the Notre Dame touchdown. Whoa, he is fast. What you look like? It's about to go up. Break him like
So one thing that definitely stands out to me is we certainly understand every school does not have this level of media capability that we get. But at the same time, in one day or 2 days, you guys have assets that feed you for the entire season, right? That's also pretty efficient, right? At the end of the day, which is pretty cool. So let's jump to now, how do we convert this to a donor day, right? Because one of the biggest parts of this is there is a real purpose to production day, right, for Notre Dame, and that you need the assets that come from it. And one little tweak that becomes a donor event is that it's about the experience. Yes, those outputs are going to be fantastic, right? But that day does need to be tweaked a tiny bit to be slightly more special, if you will, or at least more structured. So here were kind of the goals we established with Notre Dame on okay, if you're going to do this, what changes do you need to make and what changes don't you need to make? And we really quickly arrived on keep it as true as possible, right? That we do want, you got to do the smoke walk, right? Everyone's got to do the smoke walk, right? So you got to keep some of those things there. At the same time, right, you want to build some big camaraderie that would maybe not be quite the intent of your existing production day, right? You guys have to churn folks through, get it done. Whereas here, you want everyone laughing at each other, right? You want these folks to get to see each other's pictures, poke fun and have fun. And make the takeaways, very special. Have those moments that Kim described of how did you get to do that, right? And then from our perspective, right, where does DI come in? We look at it from, okay, can we take one of these ideas or some of these ideas, maybe give them a little more permanency or transportability, and can we maybe make something that can live on, right? That can carry on past that event. So we'll take you through kind of how we do this. So in other words, let's put it another way. We'd want to create some assets that Notre Dame could utilize over and over again. In other words, give them the box, not the toy, right? They're great at making the images. So can we give them some easier ways to do that? That's the easiest way for me to describe it. So sorry, floor plan. This was mine made up, by the way. I realize Kim, Mario, and Rob, right? The stations you might set up for the donor day. And so the whole idea is, right, okay, we'll start from the beginning, right? So if you register for this event, you pick your sport in theory, right? You pick your music, maybe you pick your props, so that if you want to, if you want to be women's basketball, you want to be football, you want to be hockey, right? All right, so that's okay. We can still do the photo shoot based on that. But the fun part is, right, now you come to orientation. And I want to point this out because we talked it through. This is not fantasy camp, right? This is about, this is about production day. So the bottom picture is in fact from Notre Dame, fantasy camp somewhere along the way, right? That is not, that isn't a different event entirely. That this is, really, truly unique. So, but now, so everyone arrives and you get your uniform, right? You have your props. and we start the day. So now same thing, we need to replicate by the existing production day. We probably don't need as many people, right? We don't need all of that necessarily. Production help would be my thought. And Kim, your team is likely to have more of an engagement here, right? That obviously doesn't exist on production day. This is definitely about engaging with your donors in a different way.
I think Viva should still be there though. I'll put that plug in.
Hey, I left. Viva's down here. Trust me. So, and by the way, Brian, Rick, or anybody, feel free to chime in as I'm going through this, but this was kind of the structure, right? The framework we thought keep in place, but also look for opportunities to be a little bit different. So station one, we know we don't want to depart too far from existing stations. So we looked at some ways we could alter a little bit, bring some depth, bring some different tools, right, for Notre Dame to use, and then maybe have a broader use. So here was idea one. And before anyone panics, I know we're messing with the logo. The point here is the rail system. It doesn't have to be the logo. The camera could be on the rail system. But Ryan and Rick, if you want to kind of give us some background as to the intent behind this, that would be fantastic because you're the designers, I am not.
I can jump in. I think it's just, again, for us is trying to make that experience look a little bit like the player experience. So not to, venture too far away from that, but also pump it up a little bit, have a little bit more fun with it. And then for us specifically, it's about thinking through, how do you compartmentalize that a little bit? How do you get it to where you can move it around, meaning that you can store it for the year, or you can shift it and put it somewhere else. I think those things kind of come into our mind a bit when we're talking through this. But this is just an idea to take the N and the D from the logo, put it on rails to where you have a little bit more flexibility from a photographic standpoint. You put some cool lighting around it and some effects, and just again have that be a little bit special. A little bit pumped up from, and a little bit kind of more like version 2.0 from where the players are. But again, just getting this is typically first stage of what we would do creative is to throw some ideas out. Some of them stick, some of them don't. We're aware of that and okay with that. But we, the idea is to keep the Notre Dame team involved in our process and not design in a bubble, and then be able to talk through, okay, like this works, this doesn't work, we need to come up with another idea here, that sort of thing. So it's really kind of all of us getting around the table, rolling up our sleeves and figuring out what creative ideas work in these specific areas.
And Ryan, we talked a little bit about this, right? So the whole point of this is sort of intent, as Rick said, right? So you could theoretically keep the ND logo as it is that you guys have, and now maybe you put the players on the rail. Maybe you put the camera on the rail, right? The whole point is adding another layer of movement here, right? From a photographer standpoint, which Ryan is, but it gives you all sorts of new things to play with, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from a content creator standpoint that you're always constantly looking for depth and dimensionality to work with. And this obviously gives you that in spades in a manner that just a static logo would not. So simply speaking, from the perspective of a photographer, I would love to have an opportunity to utilize something like this. Whether it ends up being this exact sort of functionality to be determined, right? But there's a lot to play with here. Positioning, placement of camera, movement would work well for both video and still capture lots of flexibility.
Yeah, and ideally right now we've handed Notre Dame an asset that is very repeatable, can be used season to season, can be used for the event, right? But as an easy setup breakdown, move to the next spot, which is again kind of the intent here. And you can see, yeah, straight on. So this is as the logo is moving towards you. So, and then the other part we would look at, sort of speaking to the same idea, is that, okay, with whatever the existing sets are, the other part we're looking at is, can we add a layer of portability to them, right? So that if this now needs to be a part of events going forward and not just production day, Can we give a little more permanency, to a sick wall, to a green screen, right? That now is very easy for Notre Dame to pick up and store, but is one you will use over and over and over again, which we know the green screen certainly plays, right? Then, right, the kind of the next iteration we looked at was, okay, well, what about creating a whole new thing that maybe is launched every year for the donor production day? It can become a broader fan experience, but then again, it's also still an asset that Notre Dame can tweak, right? That you can play with, that you can do different things with. So this was, one of the ideas. And again, Rick, if you want to chime in on kind of the intent, the idea, behind some of this.
Yeah, just to add more assets to it and to make it fresh every year. I think one of the important things is to think about, the donors definitely, you want to get them engaged in this, and you want, to Kim's point, you want this to feel special, and you want them to be able to share it with their friends. You also want them to keep coming back, right? It has to be fresh every year. It has to be something a little the same, but a little bit different every year. So if they do it this year, you want them to be, ideally enthusiastic about coming back next year. Again, just the initial kernel of ideas for a lot of this, but the photo op pieces, lighting is huge right now. These, kind of photo boxes, photo labs, if you will, are you see this a lot in social media and such, and it's about identifying what those things are, identifying them as shareable moments, making it easy for people to take pictures, whether it's a professional photographer or a non-professional photographer, and making the assets very shareable. And again, keeping budget, portability, storability, all those things in mind are kind of tops on our list. I will say that when we first initially start talking about this, the design team, our mind tends to start to run wild, and we get really excited about stuff, and then somebody usually puts up the timeout symbol and says that we've spent about $7 million of Notre Dame's money right now, and that they're not going to spend that much money on this, and we have to pull it back and really start getting down to what the essence is. And I think what Kim and Drew have been talking about is, kind of specifically for this is where what we get to is that staying true to the initial ask is that we want to do something that donors can feel special. They can feel part of the team. They can feel integrated into media day, production day. And we can do it without a lot of work from a lot of people. We're not hiring a bunch of people to set this stuff up. It's there. It can be part of it. We can, like what Drew said, is that we can dovetail into what Rob's team is doing and what the Notre Dame team is doing, and have it be something that's tangent to media day and production day, but not necessarily another gigantic production that ends up costing a lot of money and being a big headache for anybody. You can get in, you can get out, you could do something entirely special, stopping short of it being fantasy camp.
And Rick,
So
right?
that's the lens that we've been looking through for most of these things.
And this one kind of started with the locker room experience, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of said, well, I don't know how realistic it is to take 3 lockers, set them out, So instead, this kind of speaks to the materiality, the materials that make up the locker room space without over committing to any one idea. Whereas your backdrop, right, your center backdrop could change, and it stands on its own, but also, and Ryan, you can kind of speak to this, right? It stands on its own as its own, photo moment, but also, right, is set up in a way that you can stick some smoke machines in here. You could play with this set a little bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like initially we looked at this sort of being just one continuous V without these little open slats, if you will. And again, I can speak probably best from perspective of a photographer. Those little openings, although they seem kind of insignificant, could really be very well used from a lighting standpoint. whether it's smoke machines, what have you. There's a variety of ways that a seasoned content creator could utilize those to take this to another level beyond what you're seeing in this image, and keep it fresh with the change of kind of the background at the back of it. There's a lot of flexibility similar to the other approach in using this to create new and fresh content.
Yeah. So this one, right, Rob, you and your team ideally could do something fun with this, but at the same time, this one could come out and stand on its own, without anybody having to do anything. That was kind of the intention here. And again, right, so maybe that becomes, as we look at, okay, the donors have had their event, they come to the final reception, right? Ideally, we're somewhere where we got a big screen, you got a running photo reel of the day. Everyone gets to laugh at each other, right? Maybe the takeaways are you get to keep the uniform and the prop you brought, right? Maybe you learn that last photo station, you were the first to get to use that new asset that will go in the stadium. And maybe you learn that your photos are going to go up on the big screen during the football season or basketball season, right? At random, just for fun. Maybe there's a highlight reel at the end, and maybe there's that opportunity to order photos from the day, just like it was, old school photo shoot. So, right, that, kind of thinking through that takeaway deliverables from an event like this, that I'm making these ones up, but it's, I think it's probably in the realm of exactly what a donor is going to look for. The ability to share some stuff on social media, the idea that you get to brag you're on the big screen, during a game, some of those things are kind of the key. I think you would agree, Kim.
Yeah, absolutely true.
Awesome. So there's kind of the intention, right? But I think what's important, I think, for the audience is even if Notre Dame didn't necessarily need to make this a corporate event, let's say, right? I think it's, again, a great example of one that is taking an existing thing, an existing asset, an existing event that has a much broader revenue appeal if you wanted to. And Mario, I mean, I don't know if you guys have taken this conversation this far, but right, the idea that now either whether it's for your sponsors, as we kind of talked about on the call, or whether you were trying to attract events, right, that this could then be still set up again for, corporate retreat, something along those lines. I don't know if that's one you discussed.
Not specifically, Kim may have more on that, but I think you're onto something when you say we want to be able to use these assets for many different purposes. That is that when we talk about diversifying the revenue streams, right, and using your assets and leveraging those assets, that's exactly what we're talking about. What form that takes, we don't know just yet, but we want to be able to use these assets in many different ways.
Yep. And Drew, I'll add, we've started to brainstorm what are some of the donor groups that this may work for. And we have an advisory council. That's a small group of donors that we think this could be great for in year one. We have our top athletics annual giving society, our Jesse Harper Council, that can make a lot of sense for something like this. And it'll be interesting to kind of pilot this in the first year, see how it goes. Could we handle more donors? Do we want to loop in corporate partners? So I see us potentially expanding in the future, seeing how year one goes.
Yeah, the number of donors is that one is interesting. I know we talked about that, but right. So let's assume year one is probably the lowest you're going to have. But the thought that you get a waiting list for that one, or how many can you truly handle, is pretty cool, pretty fun. And sorry, the last
we might need 2 Vivas if we get once we broaden it. We're going to have to broaden that for sure.
I knew Viva needed a raise. And I think, again, if you have a moment that is one of these stations that becomes one that can live on in a stadium, in an arena, also right for a corporate sponsor or someone, along those lines too. So again, the intention here and the reason we chose this was, yes, Notre Dame is a big institution with resources that others don't have, but this is not that idea. Like, this is truly about taking something that is already a part of the fabric of an institution and just leveraging it in a different way. That's why we thought it was pretty cool. Okay, that's what I've got. Am I missing anything, everyone on this call, before we open up for questions?
I'll just add one thing, Drew. The one thing that we talked about a lot as a group is, more than anything, we don't want to take away from the student athlete experience of Media Day. So I do think that's critically important. In the end, Media Day is about the student athletes. It's about getting the content, but also them having that full experience. And you guys saw the video, like, they were having a blast. And that's exactly what we want. So we want to be really intentional about how we add on this benefactor event element without taking away from the core mission of a production day, media day.
No, very well said. And Ryan, sorry, that reminds me, I've got to say it. You brought up the idea of student athletes being the photographers, or at least like some of the photographers, which would be hilarious as well. Like that, these men and women got to now, make the donors do, funny stuff, which I think is a brilliant idea too.
Either that or have a coach in a costume, pretend like he's one of the photographers as a surprise. Like I think something like that could add a ton of fun and value to the experience for the donors. So, yeah.
Yeah. So the idea, Kim, that maybe the student athletes become as much a part of the planning, right, to make this sort of still their event would be kind of cool too. Very
cool. Maybe Rob could get in the leprechaun outfit. That would be an idea for media day. That would be. I'm getting a big head shake there. No,
yeah, that's a hard no, I think.
Maybe like 75 pounds ago, Kim.
Okay. So we'll open it for questions. Again, the way we set this up, I'm going to stop share. Hope that's all right. If anyone needs me to jump back to something, we can do that. So if this works, assuming I can see it, and we can all see it, if you want to raise your hand to ask a question, virtually, that is awesome. We're happy to do that. I can also pull up the chat if anyone wants to type it in. I'm good either way. I hope I can see reactions. I should probably switch my view. Questions. Am I missing any? No? Here's one that just got typed in. Can you share some of the donor assets that resulted from production day? And just to confirm, Kim, Mario, Rob, you have never done this before, right? So the idea is that the production day that currently exists for student athletes would be adapted for donors, but that has not yet happened. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think we'd Rob would love your thoughts on some potential assets, but yeah, Judy, we're really looking to create something that could be digital so that it could be shared for those who are active on Facebook or Instagram or even TikTok, who knows? And then we'd also come up with something that would be more, whether it's a printed photo, Drew, you brought up the idea of the playing cards, something that they could also take with them, put in their offices, et cetera. So we would be looking for two types of assets, I think.
Yeah, in the case of the student athletes, the focus is on a lot of very high quality, high resolution content. So, and it runs the gamut from still photography to live video, and then those assets get turned into all manner of content, right? Whether that's a GIF or a short form video, to a treatment it's put through. To specifically sort of create a look and feel, all of that, or even graphics. I think the goal, this is just my take on doing a donor-centered event, is you're going to focus less on sort of high resolution, high quality, and more like quick turnaround, like stuff that you can quickly spit out, distribute so that your donors can share and, easily transmit and post. You don't want to get bogged down in like super large files and basically overkill in terms of the quality.
We got a couple more come in, but Rob, to that point, right? I think I'd want to reiterate that, yes, Notre Dame has this capability of a production day, but for one thing, much of this is you could rent much of this equipment, right? For one thing, but it doesn't have to even be this level of sophistication for the capture. That a day like this, even with some of the most basic photography stations, right, would be freaking awesome, right? Just the idea that it's bringing you closer to the team and the student athletes to put on the uniform, to go in the locker room, to have your photo taken. That's one thing that I think is really important in this.
Yeah, I think
Um,
breaking down that barrier,
Yeah, yeah.
coming closer is key. I would say from a creative standpoint too, just before we get into questions, these type of projects for myself and our design studio are really fun. Kudos to the Notre Dame staff for being brave enough to submit this to us. Obviously, none of us have this all figured out. It is kind of a quote unquote never been done before type thing. And that's really fun. It's that, we've been on this journey together over the last couple of weeks to get to where we are right now and to really brainstorm some of these ideas. But we don't pretend to have it all figured out. We probably won't have it all figured out, even if we do this, say for next year. But that's the fun of it, right? Is that we'll do it once and we'll tweak it and we'll do it again and we'll tweak it some more, and really kind of gel around this idea. I think it's important to have goals and the why, and what the takeaways are to Drew's point. But from speaking from DI specifically, it doesn't always have to be an RFP that's pushed out or that level of detail of like, we have it from university to designer. It doesn't always have to be, we have it all figured out, we have all the answers and we just want you to execute. It could be like it is like the sort of ideation that we're working through right now is like, hey, we have this idea that we think might be cool. Let's spitball it a little bit and figure out if it is cool. Kick the tires a little bit. So
as Rick knows, that's where I live, by the way, is in the theory world.
Yeah. And to be honest, sometimes like ideas, like we'll kick them around and they're like, oh, well, like, we can't either figure out how to make it any better, or there's no reason to make it any better, or it just doesn't have legs. But again, this is from a creative standpoint. These are the type of things that we think are fun, and you start to envision what this experience is. This is more about experience, right? It's not about this thing or that thing. It's about these 10 things coming together and the donors really having this takeaway that could be really fun for them and for everybody involved.
No, that's very helpful, Rick, truly, because you're right. We love ideas. So let me jump to, I'm going to combine one of these was sent privately to me and then the other you guys can see, but number of donors, Kim, that we talked about, I'm trying to remember. And then the one that was sent to me was, do you have any thoughts on qualitative or quantitative feedback data that you gather from donors to either craft or personalize this event or after the fact? So those two, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we have two groups in mind for, hopefully piloting this idea. And one would be our advisory council for the student athlete. That's about 50 members and their spouses as well. So that's 100 people invited. Let's say, we get 60 people there would be fantastic, so that's one group we have in mind. We also have our top giving society. That's a group of about 100. So, plus spouses or so. Again, I think we'd be looking a little bit higher there, maybe the 75 to 80 range, based on who could come to campus. But that sounds like a big group, but those are kind of two of our more elite groups that we have on campus of benefactors and our top group. So I think they'd be really fun ones to start with. And Drew, to your point about imagining the donors, doing maybe the dance moves or whatever it might be, those groups have more swagger than you think. I'll tell you, they're going to be right in there. So hopefully we can share out some of that footage.
If you got the money, you should have the swagger. It makes sense.
They do. We've got some cool cats in that group for sure.
Awesome.
And then for the that second part of the question, yeah, we try to, after all of our events for our benefactors, send out surveys where they get to provide feedback, both quantitative and qualitative for sure. So we'd want to collect, what did you love? What could have been better? What was missing? How was the food? All of that. So for sure, we don't have any on this event yet, of course, but we will definitely do that.
Awesome. And then the next one is pitch day. Do those submissions come strictly from athletic staff, or is it an open event for students, donors, faculty, et cetera?
It's been an evolution. It started out with just sort of an FIM centered event where we just fighting Irish media employees submitting pitches. Then we opened it up to colleagues across athletics and involved some other groups more closely, including the teams themselves. But at the end of the day, we usually give the coach the opportunity to sort of designate which pitch is their sort of favorite or veto ones that they're not particularly fond of. I think the most recent development has been we have had student athletes involved, and that's been a particularly strong development and fun because we've had some football student athletes actually come to pitch day and pitch ideas. So that's really great, and it actually is a sort of full embodiment of what we're trying to accomplish, which is to have student athletes' voice involved in everything that we do.
And there's one rule, right? If you come to pitch day, you have to pitch.
Yeah, that's right.
It's good. I like it. Awesome. So by the way, Judy, Sarah, Chris, Max, thank you very much for these questions. Any others we can answer? Check in the chat. Well, as we're waiting for just a moment, and we will make sure Dana gets this deck so you all can look at it as well. If you have more questions, you can always reach out to us. I'm not seeing others. Does that mean we did a great job or a terrible job? I'm always confused by that. Answered them all. Okay, going once, going twice. I think we're covered. Yeah, again, please feel free to reach out to us anytime. My contact information will be in that deck, but we love ideas, as Rick said, and don't care how crazy they are. And again, another open window for submissions in this format will be here in a couple months. Because we'll do this exact same thing again with another idea.
Sounds good. Thank you, Dimensional Innovations. Thank you, Notre Dame. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And as Drew mentioned, keep an eye out. We'll be sending the recording of this webinar as well as the presentation slides probably later this afternoon. So we appreciate your support.
Thank you all so
Have a
much.
good day.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.